Is this $2 herb that you can get at the grocery store a better solution to hair loss than $50 minoxidil? Or you could even get this for free if you like scavenge around your grandmother's garden. Rosemary oil has been taking over the internet, and countless people have claimed that it has transformed their scalp. From a guy who literally claims that this got rid of his baldness, to this girl who's boiling rosemary in her kitchen sink and using it on her scalp, all the way to this person who's creating a hairsicle. Is hairsicle? This is like rosemary water put in like an ice cube that is hair combed shape that we're now combing through our hair. Let's talk about this and why some people are saying that this little plant that we use to garnish our potatoes is actually a better choice than products like Rogaine, aka minoxidil. Well, I am your resident medical esthetician, your acne big sister who has been struggling with my own hair loss. But this is also our little moment to talk about science-based beauty and to look at the evidence, the medical studies that have actually been done on rosemary oil and see how they compare scientifically versus what's being shouted about on the internet. And I've spoken a little bit recently about how I have been losing my hair. Call it stress, call it emotional dysregulation more recently, call it growing older or other things. I've actually been using a lot on my scalp, some very expensive $200 serums to $1,000 hair helmets. But I haven't exactly tried rosemary oil. And I've actually tried peppermint oil and lavender oil in the past, but I personally haven't tried rosemary oil. And you may be wondering, Cassandra, why didn't you try rosemary if you've tried peppermint and lavender? Great question. Well, there have actually been studies done on mice and rats that looked at peppermint and lavender. And that's why I decided to try it. Now, those were done on rats, not humans. And I'm sorry, do I look like a rat? I hope not. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. However, when it comes to some scientifically backed data, there have been studies done on animals and on humans that are very, very interesting. And we're gonna focus on the ones that mention rosemary oil to figure out if this is a fad that's going to fade, or if this is going to be something that works and doesn't cost a ton of money. So first, what are the claims? People on TikTok and the internet are specifically saying that rosemary oil and rosemary water and these rosemary icicles, hairsicles, number 1, regrow hair. Number 2, promote thicker hair. And number 3, prevent hair from falling out excessively. And how have people been using this rosemary? Do they just take the garnish from their potatoes and rub it into their scalps? No, we're doing all sorts of fun stuff on TikTok. Let's take a look. This girl is using rosemary water every single day for a month and spraying it into her hair. She's combing it through and basically letting it sit on the scalp. She specifically is doing this for hair loss and to regrow her hair's thickness and density. And she's measuring her hair and she does say that it turns out longer. But is that just her hair growing over time naturally, or is that due to the rosemary? Then there's this guy who has absolutely been blowing up on TikTok. His video has been recommended to me like 8 different times, and then a bunch of my friends have seen it and texted it to me and were like, Cassandra, have you tried this for your balding head? And I'm like, wait a second. So while this creator, Life of Zeph, really has an impressive before and after, keep in mind he's not just using rosemary oil. He's also doing microneedling. He's also spoken about using minoxidil. And essentially he's using a bunch of treatments at the same time to try to get the best results. And he doesn't care where the results are coming from. He's just desperate to get his hair back. And listen, I don't know exactly how he's feeling, but I'm knowing how I'm feeling, which is stressed, depressed, and mentally under arrest. But I don't blame him. When you're desperate, you're desperate. And his before and afters are really shocking. But then there's other people who aren't using rosemary oil. They are using rosemary water. This TikTok specifically shows 3 mistakes that you're making when making rosemary water, which is number 1, for some reason, leaving it in the fridge. Interesting. And also not leaving it on the hair long enough. Now these curls are gorgeous, but I don't know if these tips are really worth anything. And of course, we can't forget about the ice cubes, the hairsicles. There are literally people freezing this rosemary water into ice cubes so that they can rub them on their head. And then there are some people that are putting them in like these hair comb popsicle molds to massage their scalp, which makes sense, but then also stringing it down the strands of their hair. And that's where we have to talk about science and break down what the science actually says and what this may or may not do. In order to understand if rosemary oil or rosemary water or anything that you put on your hair is going to help grow it, you have to understand that hair grows grows from the root. The hair anatomy has a root, a shaft, and an end, and those ends do tend to get split. Now this isn't going to help, and whenever you're hearing about frizzy hair or hair styling, we're talking about that middle area. It has a cuticle, and sometimes that cuticle is dry and rough. It can kind of look frizzy and stripped, and other times it's smooth. But anything from here on down doesn't matter. If we're talking about hair growth, about balding, about androgenetic alopecia, or about any concerns with the scalp, we gotta go to the scalp, which is more related to your skin than the dead keratin that's protruding out of it that is your hair. Now, when it comes to our scalps, yes, our hairs grow out of it, but our hairs grow in different stages. There's the anagen phase, which is where new baby hairs and hairs are actually growing. There's the catagen phase, otherwise known as the transition phase. And then there's the telogen phase, the resting phase, which is what most of our hair is at until it decides to fall out. Now, it can fall out for many reasons. Number one, just because it's at the end of its phase, which is technically called the exogen stage, where the hairs just kind of let themselves go, and it's normal to lose about 80 hairs on average every single day. But then for some people, if you're under periods of extreme stress or illness, if you are going through a tough time physically, emotionally, or both, your body may respond by shedding your hair. Or for people who are malnourished or are not really keeping up with their nutrition, sometimes the body sheds hair as a form of showing that stress, as an impact of not being nourished properly. Now, there are also other conditions such as female pattern or male pattern baldness. There are issues like androgenetic alopecia or alopecia areata, or even things like putting your hair up in a ponytail can cause tension, which can cause pulling in certain spaces, leading to bald patches there. I mean, we love JoJo Siwa, but have you seen JoJo Siwa? And for people who wear really tight hairstyles, this traction alopecia can be an issue. Now, obviously, the cause of hair loss, whether it's nutrition or stress or genetics, that's going to have a huge impact on what will or won't work for regrowing the hair. If the issue is bad nutrition, let's fix the nutrition. If the issue is stress, let's try to get rid of the stress. Or if it's this traction alopecia, let's try to change up the hairstyles. But there are many products on the market, including many that I have tried, that claim to help with hair growth, literally growing new hairs or helping promote hair density, making sure that more hairs are coming out of each follicle, or the hairs that are already there are staying on and hanging on longer, keeping them in that telogen or resting phase for longer. Now, the good news is that some scientists and doctors and researchers have actually looked into rosemary and its hair benefits. And there seems to be three main ways that rosemary oil, rosemary extract, or rosemary derivatives seem to help. Number one is by stimulating circulation. Very similar to the peppermint oil that I've tried or the lavender oil. If circulation is brought to the scalp, this area that the hair grows, that is going to provide more nutrients. And if there's more nutrients coming to the hair, the idea is that the hair is going to be healthier and stronger overall. That's why things like getting a scalp massage can actually be beneficial to preventing hair loss, because it literally brings circulation, which is blood flow, and therefore literally nutrients that travel through the blood to this area that actually help the hair hold on longer and look better and shinier and stronger for longer. And we do know that circulation promotes nutrients being brought to certain areas of the skin. And yeah, if rosemary oil or any of these other oils can really stimulate circulation here, this could help. Now, the second possible way is through nerve tissue. That's right, healing nerve tissue damage. The nerves that relay signals throughout our entire body are also responsible for how our hair goes through those different stages. And if this rosemary can somehow heal damaged nerve tissue, it can help send signals to keep the hair longer and stronger and healthier for longer. And yes, this might even mean regrowing and rejuvenating nerves in this area. And more nerves means potentially more signaling and therefore more activity in this area overall. That leads to longer, stronger, healthier, denser hair. Now, the third and final way that people think rosemary oil might be working for hair was actually tested on rats and mice. And they basically shaved the dorsal area. The dorsal basically means the back. I think of a dorsal fin. If you want to know dorsal versus plantar flexion, that's how you remember it. Remember to plant in the ground and dorsal. Anyways, the scientists shaved the mouse's backs and then they put some rosemary oil on there. And what do you know? The rosemary oil actually dramatically increased hair growth in the mice that had their backs shaved and then had the rosemary oil put on. And when scientists looked at exactly how this was happening, they found that the rosemary oil or the rosemary extract seemed to bind to certain receptors in the mice's skin that basically blocked out certain sex hormones from acting on those hairs, specifically preventing dihydrotestosterone from binding to androgen receptors if you want to get specific about it. But basically this means that certain sex hormones that mice and humans have that can be responsible for hair loss were blocked by adding rosemary extract or oil to these mice's backs. And again, that's in mice doesn't mean it's gonna work for humans. I don't look or act like a mouse or a rat, at least I hope I don't. But if it worked on mice, many animal models are used to justify moving forward with human studies. And thankfully, we now actually have human studies instead of just relying on the skin of these mice's backs. Which, yes, it was literally the skin on the mice's backs, so there's that. Well, how did this work in humans? Thankfully, we don't just have a study, we have a randomized comparative trial where literally 50 people were given minoxidil, aka Rogaine, the potent stuff, and then 50 more were given rosemary oil. And all of these people were struggling with androgenetic alopecia, basically this kind of Christmas tree looking thinning down the middle here and sometimes on the crown of the head. Now, people used this twice a day, not just for a month, not just for a week, because they saw it on TikTok, not just for a month, not even for 3 months, but for 6 months total. And what do you think happened? It's time for a little game show, a little skincare TikTok game show with Cass. On the right, we have Team A, who used 2% minoxidil, aka Rogaine, on their hair to keep it from falling out. And on the left, we have Team B, who used the rosemary oil on their hair twice a day for 6 months. Which team do you think did better? They were the same. Literally. Nobody saw results after 3 months, but after 6 months, they both saw results that were literally comparable. However, there was a difference. The minoxidil/Rogaine group actually had more scalp itching and redness, whereas the rosemary oil group didn't have that same irritation. Not to mention, the minoxidil Rogaine product costs like $50 at the drugstore, and if you get the pink container with the exact same ingredients, it costs $60. Pink tax, that's a video for another day. Well, rosemary can be found in your grandmother's garden. Wow! For once, a DIY that actually scientifically backs up. Now, here's the catch. They used this twice a day for 6 months. Remember, both teams saw 0 results after 3 months. So what makes us think that this is going to work for us at home? Not to mention, if we go out picking up some rosemary in our grandmother's garden, the rosemary that's grown in one climate with lots of water and fertile soil is going to be very different than rosemary that is just grown on the side of a freeway because somehow it found itself there. The quality of ingredients matters, and how the oil or the extract is processed also matters. This one girl claims that if you leave it in your fridge, it doesn't work. I don't know about that, but I don't know, maybe that matters. The end all be all is that there are medical studies that have looked at both animals and humans and found out that yes, rosemary oil and rosemary extract does seem to have a benefit for human scalp health and human hair, specifically in these 3 main ways that we mentioned, from potentially stimulating circulation to nerve tissue regeneration, all the way to blocking these testosterone sex hormones from wreaking havoc on our hair. But if the science does actually back this up, what does this mean for you? Should we be doing the rosemary hairsicles? Should we be doing the water? Should the oils? Well, remember, our scalp is where the hair comes out of. So if we want to treat issues with the scalp or with hair loss, they need to be concentrated here. Meaning if you want to, freeze some rosemary water and put it on your split ends, be my guest, but that's not going to help regrow hair. Concentrate the efforts on the scalp. But then what's better? The rosemary oil, the rosemary extract, the rosemary water? Well, rosemary oil is a highly concentrated form of the rosemary plant. It is literally the oil. Have you ever gotten oil out of a rosemary bush? No? Well, it's because it's hard. You need a lot of rosemary and you need to extract it really well. Can be done, and it's great when you do. But there's also rosemary water. Rosemary water or rosemary essence is kind of a diluted version of this rosemary oil. It's not as potent, but it can still be really good. And for people who do want to spray this on their scalp or who don't want to use the oil or who want to make it themselves, a rosemary extract or rosemary water is going to be more accessible, even if it is less potent. And we can hypothesize or we can guess that if it's diluted more, it probably means it's going to be a little bit less efficient, or it's just going to take longer to work. Now also, do you need to apply it every day? Remember that the scientific studies did this literally twice a day, morning and evening. And this guy on TikTok, he did it twice a day, morning and evening. Does that mean you have to if you want to, regrow some hair and keep the hair that you already have lasting longer on your noggin? Not necessarily, but it's probably a good idea. Remember that the concentration matters. So the oil is going to be more potent than the water, and if you apply it twice or 3 times a day, it's going to be more potent than just once a week. However, more doesn't always mean better. If you leave potent ass rosemary oil on your scalp 24/7 and it burns and stings, you might end up with scalp burns. Hey, nobody wants that. There have literally been medical reports from emergency rooms showing people who put undiluted essential oils on their scalps and had burns because of it, or went in the sun and they got irritated and now they got burns and blisters on their scalp. And guess what happens? If you burn and blister, a scab forms, then a scar forms, and that hair can have a real hard time growing through the scar if you damage those hair follicles underneath the skin. So avoid that. The best thing that you can do is look at the data and look at the science. Some people used a rosemary oil twice a day. That's what we know works. And if we start mixing around variables or doing different things, we can hypothesize that something may work similarly, but the truth is that unless we test it, I guess we'll never know. And then that also brings us to, is this safe to do at home? You know, it is rosemary oil, so hopefully it can't be super harmful if you're not shoving it in your eyes. I think the biggest issue is using undiluted essential oils on the skin or the scalp, especially if you go in the sun. Protect yourself. If you're using an essential oil, dilute it. Speak to a doctor, a dermatologist, or a hair expert, also called a trichologist, or even speak to someone who's licensed in herbal medicine or a Chinese medicine practitioner, because they actually have studied these things and may be able to guide you better. At home, especially if you're diluting it, the biggest issue might be steam burns. Like, don't forget to turn off that stove. Don't put your hand on the hot burner, you know? Life skills that my parents didn't teach me, and that's why I have a burn on my leg. Anyways, there aren't a lot of major risks. And again, when we looked at Team A versus Team B, one of them actually was more irritated by the Rogaine, the 2% minoxidil, than the rosemary group was. And then what if you just don't want to go through the hassle of cooking this rosemary water and like freezing it into a hair sickle and then like getting rosemary oil and like massaging into your scalp? Are there any products that do it for us? Yeah, there are actually shampoos and conditioners and scalp invigorators that have rosemary oil already extracted and put into it. You could use those, or you could literally buy rosemary oil from the grocery store. Or again, if you want to, you could potentially make it yourself. Just remember that the sourcing and the quality is going to be different if you get it from your grandma's lush, fertile, lovingly watered garden versus the rosemary that you saw growing off the side of a freeway. Please don't pick rosemary on the side of the freeway. That is very dangerous. And even as TikTok is telling us to do this and how great it is, and even though the science backs it up, there are some people that it didn't work for. Look at this girl. She's literally wondering why using rosemary on her hair is not getting rid of her bald spot. Listen, there are some reasons, like scarring, that will cause your head to not grow hair. And sometimes that just is what it is, and rosemary oil won't fix it. Or if you're using a rosemary extract, maybe it's not as potent as an oil and doesn't work. Or if you do it once and never again, it probably won't work. Remember, even the people in the trial had to do it for 3 months and they saw no results until 6 months later. Good things take time, baby. And skincare and scalp care is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And some people apparently have used rosemary oil on their hair and their hair fell out. It doesn't seem super common, and it sounds like maybe they didn't dilute it or they like used something else on their hair. Maybe it was like after they got their hair dyed and there was some reaction between the rosemary oil and the bleach that they just put on their hair. But, you know, those outlier events can happen. So what does this mean for you? It means the medical data shows that rosemary oil at 2% when used on humans regularly seems to work. There's some promising science behind the 3 ways that rosemary can benefit the scalp from circulation and nerve tissue and blocking those sex hormones. And for a lot of people, this may be a great budget option or a great cruelty-free option to things like Rogaine or minoxidil that you might not want to use. But does that mean it's right for you? I can't make that decision for you. All I can tell you is that I am very excited to put this on my hair. Yeah, I've been using a hair helmet, I've been using serums, I've been trying to not pull at my hair. It's been coming out in clumps because I'm stressed. I've been trying to manage my stress. I'm in therapy every day, but I'm gonna be putting some rosemary on my hair. I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna see how it works, and I'm gonna bring it back to you. And if you wanna know how it works for me, you know how to join the Beautiful Butterfly family. You know where those buttons are. And literally text or email this to yourself with like a little scheduled reminder. So in a couple months, like 6 months or even a year, you come back and see whether or not this worked for me. Save it for later so you don't forget it. And always remember to stay hydrated, both orally and topically. Reapply that SPF and be beautiful both inside and out. I love you. I love your hairs. I love the ones that have found their way down your drain. And I cannot wait to see you and your pretty little scalp in this video about scalp exfoliation. Because yes, I do exfoliate my scalp. Love you guys. Bye.